She hid her identity as Viper, a fighter ace with 7 confirmed kills, for 12 years flying commercial airlines. When her co-pilot collapsed and F-22 Raptors faced a deadly crisis over Denver, her secret military skills saved 283 lives, finally exposing her legendary combat reputation to the world. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Maya Johnson adjusted her uniform tie as she walked through the bustling terminal of Chicago O'Hare International Airport. At 38, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen things most people could never imagine. But to everyone around her, she was just another airline pilot heading to work another routine flight. "Morning, Captain Johnson," called out First Officer Jake Thompson as he approached the gate. "Ready for another exciting trip to Denver?" Maya smiled politely. "Always ready, Jake. How's the weather looking?" "Clear skies all the way. Should be smooth sailing." If only he knew, Maya thought to herself. 12 years ago, clear skies meant something entirely different to her. They meant perfect conditions for air-to-air combat. They meant hunting enemy fighters at 30,000 feet. They meant being the hunter instead of the hunted. But Jake didn't know any of that. None of her colleagues did. To them, Maya was a competent pilot who had somehow earned her captain's stripes through the usual civilian channels. They saw her excellent flying skills, her calm under pressure, and her ability to handle difficult situations. What they didn't see was the classified training that made those skills possible. They didn't know about the 7 confirmed kills that earned her the call sign Viper. They had no idea that the woman walking beside them had once been one of the most feared fighter pilots in the world. Maya had worked hard to keep it that way. For 12 years she had lived a double life. By day, she was Captain Johnson of United Airlines Flight 447. By night, she was haunted by memories of missions she could never talk about, victories she could never celebrate, and losses she could never properly mourn. The passengers were already boarding when Maya and Jake reached the aircraft. Boeing 777, registration number N784UA. 283 souls on board for what should have been a routine 3-hour flight to Denver. Maya did her usual walk-around inspection, checking every detail with the precision that had once meant the difference between life and death in combat. "Everything looks good, Captain," Jake reported as they settled into the cockpit. "Weather's perfect, flight plan filed, all systems green." Maya nodded, running through her pre-flight checklist. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency across the controls, muscle memory from thousands of hours in both military and civilian aircraft. The Boeing's cockpit was spacious and comfortable compared to the cramped confines of an F-16 Fighting Falcon, but Maya sometimes missed the raw power and agility of her old fighter jet. "United 447, you're cleared for takeoff on runway 22 left," came the voice of air traffic control. "Cleared for takeoff, runway 22 left, United 447, Maya responded, advancing the throttles. The massive engines spooled up, and the aircraft began its roll down the runway. As they lifted off into the clear Chicago sky, Maya felt the familiar thrill of flight. It never got old, this moment when tons of metal defied gravity and soared into the heavens. But today's flight would be different from any she had flown in the past 12 years. They were cruising at 35,000 feet, somewhere over the cornfields of Nebraska, when everything went wrong. Maya was reviewing their arrival procedures for Denver when she heard a sound that made her blood run cold. It was the sound of Jake gasping for air, followed by the thud of his body slumping forward against the controls. "Jake," Maya called out, reaching over to check his pulse. His skin was pale and clammy, his breathing shallow and irregular. Classic signs of a heart attack. At 29 years old, Jake was young for such a condition, but Maya had seen enough medical emergencies to recognize the symptoms. She immediately pressed the flight attendant call button. "This is Captain Johnson. I need a flight attendant in the cockpit immediately. We have a medical emergency." Within seconds, Susan, the head flight attendant, appeared at the cockpit door. Her eyes widened when she saw Jake's condition. "Oh my God, is he?" "He's alive but unconscious. Possible heart attack. I need you to get him out of here and see if there's a doctor on board. Also, make an announcement asking if there are any pilots among the passengers who might be able to help." "Right away, Captain." Maya was already working the radio as Susan and another flight attendant carefully moved Jake's unconscious form out of the cockpit. "Denver Center, United 447. We have a medical emergency on board. Request priority routing to nearest suitable airport." United 447, Denver Center. State nature of emergency. First officer incapacitated, possible cardiac event. Single pilot operation. 283 souls on board. There was a pause before the controller responded. United 447, understand single pilot operation. Denver International is 120 miles ahead. We can vector you direct if you're able to continue. Maya was calculating fuel, distance, and approach procedures when Susan returned with troubling news. Captain, we do have a doctor on board. She's with your first officer now. But there are no other airline pilots among the passengers. There's a private pilot, but he's only rated for single-engine aircraft. This was exactly the kind of situation Maya had hoped to avoid for the past 12 years. Flying a Boeing 777 was normally a two-person operation. While she was perfectly capable of landing the aircraft single-handed, the workload would be enormous. Every checklist, every radio call, every approach procedure would have to be handled by her alone. Okay, Maya said, trying to project calm confidence. Tell the passengers we're dealing with a minor medical situation and we'll be landing in Denver as planned. Try to keep them calm. As Susan left the cockpit, Maya began the process of preparing for a single-pilot approach. She programmed the autopilot for the approach to Denver, ran through emergency checklists, and mentally rehearsed every step of the landing procedure. This was where her old training would come in handy, even if no one knew it. She had just begun her descent when the situation became infinitely more complicated. United 447, Denver Center. Be advised we're tracking an aircraft squawking 7,500 approximately 50 miles northeast of your position, heading toward Denver airspace. All commercial traffic is being vectored away from the area. Maya's blood ran cold. Code 7500 was the universal aviation signal for hijacking. An aircraft somewhere in the vicinity was broadcasting that it had been taken over by hostile forces. In the post-September 11th world, that meant only one thing: potential terrorist attack. Denver Center, United 447. Understand traffic squawking 7500. Request vectors away from that traffic. United 447, turn left heading 180, descend and maintain flight level 280. We're working to clear airspace, but be advised military assets are being scrambled to intercept. Military assets. That meant fighter jets, probably F-22 Raptors from the Air National Guard unit at Buckley Air Force Base. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the high altitude. She was about to share airspace with the most advanced fighter jets in the world, flown by pilots who might have to make life-or-death decisions about shooting down civilian aircraft. The radio crackled with new activity. Multiple voices, military call signs, crisp professional communications that Maya recognized from another lifetime. The F-22s were airborne and heading toward the hijacked aircraft. United 447, Denver Center. For your situational awareness, we have 2 F-22 aircraft in your vicinity. They are not targeting your aircraft, but maintain your assigned heading and altitude. Roger, Denver Center. Maya was running through approach checklists when she noticed something troubling on her weather radar. What had been clear skies an hour ago was now showing the beginnings of a severe thunderstorm system moving toward Denver. The airport was still reporting good conditions, but that was changing rapidly. She switched to the Denver approach frequency. Denver approach, United 447 descending through flight level 250. United 447, Denver approach. Current conditions at Denver International. Winds 270 at 18 gusting to 28, visibility 3 miles and moderate rain, ceiling 800 feet broken. Advise if you'll accept an ILS approach to runway 26. Low ceiling, gusty crosswinds, and deteriorating visibility. Maya had landed in worse conditions during her military career, but never in a Boeing 777 with nearly 300 passengers and no co-pilot. The approach would require every bit of skill and experience she possessed. Denver approach, United 447. I'll need to brief the approach. Also be advised, this is a single pilot operation due to first officer incapacitation. There was a pause on the radio, then a different voice came on. United 447, this is Denver approach supervisor. We're prepared to provide any assistance you require. We can have emergency equipment standing by and provide extra spacing from other traffic. Appreciated, Denver. Maya was setting up for the approach when the radio exploded with urgent military communications. The F-22s had intercepted the hijacked aircraft, and the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Viper flight, this is Denver Center. Unknown aircraft is not responding to radio calls and has descended to 15,000 feet, still heading toward Denver metro area. Maya's head snapped up at the call sign. Viper flight. It had been 12 years since she'd heard that designation used for anyone else. In her world there had only been one Viper, and that was her. Hearing it used by other pilots was like hearing her name called by strangers. She forced herself to focus on her own approach. The weather was getting worse by the minute, and she was still 20 miles from the airport. The Boeing was heavy with fuel, the crosswinds were increasing, and she was running out of options. That's when everything fell apart. Denver approach, United 447. I've got engine fire indications on number 2 engine. Initiating engine fire checklist. The red warning light on her instrument panel was unmistakable. Engine fire on a twin-engine aircraft was a serious emergency under the best of circumstances. With no co-pilot, deteriorating weather, and limited alternates due to the hijacking situation, it had just become potentially catastrophic. Maya's hands moved with practiced precision through the engine fire checklist. Fuel cutoff, fire suppression, engine shutdown. The Boeing was now operating on a single engine, reducing her landing options even further. United 447, Denver approach. Are you able to continue approach to Denver? Maya quickly calculated her options. Single engine, heavy weight, crosswinds, low ceiling. It was doable but barely. Any mistake would be fatal for everyone on board. Denver approach, United 447. Continuing approach. Single engine operation will need long final and emergency equipment standing by. Roger, 447. You're cleared for ILS approach runway 26. Emergency equipment is standing by. Winds now 280 at 22 gusting to 35. The winds had increased beyond the Boeing's certified crosswind limits, even under normal conditions. Maya was going to have to push the aircraft beyond its operational envelope to get everyone on the ground safely. She was 5 miles from the runway when the military situation reached a crisis point. The radio communications between the F-22s and ground control painted a terrifying picture. The hijacked aircraft had ignored all attempts at communication and was descending rapidly toward downtown Denver. All aircraft, this is Denver Center. Unknown aircraft is now at 8,000 feet descending rapidly toward Denver metropolitan area. All commercial traffic hold current positions. Maya couldn't hold her current position. With one engine failed and deteriorating weather, she had to land now or risk running out of fuel. She was committed to the approach. Denver Center, United 447. I'm unable to hold. Single engine emergency fuel situation. Continuing approach to Denver International. The controller's voice was strained when he responded. United 447, be advised military aircraft may be engaging hostile traffic in your vicinity. Maintain approach speed and altitude as assigned. Maya understood what that meant. The F-22s might have to shoot down the hijacked aircraft to prevent it from being used as a weapon against Denver. She and her passengers were flying directly into what could become an aerial combat zone. She was 3 miles from touchdown when she heard the transmission that changed everything. Viper lead, this is Magic Control. Unknown aircraft is not responding to warning shots and continues descent toward populated area. You are cleared to engage. Magic Control, Viper lead. Fox 3. The clinical language couldn't hide what had just happened. The F-22 had just fired an air-to-air missile at the hijacked aircraft. In the skies above Denver, life and death combat was taking place while Maya tried to bring her crippled airliner safely to the ground. She was on final approach, fighting crosswinds and rain, when the explosion lit up the sky ahead of her. The hijacked aircraft had been destroyed, but the danger wasn't over. Debris from the blast was falling through the clouds, and Maya had to navigate through it while maintaining her approach path. The runway lights appeared through the gloom, and Maya began the most challenging landing of her civilian career. Single engine, maximum crosswind, heavy weight, and debris falling from the sky. It required every bit of skill from her military training, skills that none of her colleagues knew she possessed. She touched down hard but safely, using every foot of runway to bring the Boeing to a stop. Fire trucks and ambulances surrounded the aircraft as soon as it came to rest. The passengers would never know how close they had come to disaster. Maya shut down the remaining engine and began her post-flight checklist. Her hands were shaking slightly from adrenaline, but she had gotten everyone on the ground alive. Jake was already being taken to the hospital by paramedics, and the passengers were being evacuated as a precaution due to the engine fire. She was completing her paperwork when a knock on the cockpit door interrupted her thoughts. Standing there was a man in a military flight suit with the rank insignia of a lieutenant colonel. Captain Johnson? I'm Lieutenant Colonel Mike Stevens, commander of the F-22 squadron that engaged the hostile aircraft. I need to speak with you about what happened up there. Maya's heart rate increased. Military debriefings were serious business, especially when they involved civilian aircraft in combat zones. Of course, Colonel. How can I help you? Stevens sat down in the co-pilot's seat and studied Maya carefully. Captain, we've been reviewing the radio recordings from today's incident. Your performance up there was exceptional. Single pilot operation, engine failure, severe weather, And you managed to complete a successful emergency landing while military aircraft were engaging hostile targets in your vicinity. Just doing my job, Colonel? That's what I wanted to talk about. Stevens pulled out a tablet and showed Maya a series of flight tracks and radio transcripts. The way you handled that approach, your radio discipline under extreme stress, your decision-making process. It's not standard civilian pilot training. Your flight profile looks like someone with military experience. Maya felt the walls closing in around her. For 12 years she had successfully hidden her background, but apparently her instincts under pressure had given her away. I'm not sure what you mean, Colonel. Stevens leaned forward. Captain, I've been flying F-22s for 8 years. Before that, I flew F-16s. I know military flying when I see it. Your performance today was textbook fighter pilot crisis management. The question is, where did you learn those skills? Maya realized there was no point in continuing the deception. If Stevens was determined to find out the truth, military databases would eventually reveal her background anyway. I flew F-16s for 6 years before transitioning to civilian aviation, she admitted quietly. F-16s. Stevens nodded thoughtfully. What was your call sign? This was the moment Maya had dreaded for 12 years. The moment when her carefully constructed civilian identity would collide with the reputation she had earned in combat. Viper. The effect on Stevens was immediate and dramatic. His eyes widened and he leaned back in his seat as if he'd been struck. Viper? As in Captain Maya Viper Johnson? 7 confirmed kills in Operation Desert Storm? The Viper who shot down 3 enemy fighters in a single engagement over Baghdad. That was a long time ago, Colonel. Holy shit, Stevens breathed, then caught himself. I'm sorry, Captain, but you're a legend. Every fighter pilot in the Air Force knows about Viper. They still teach your tactics at the fighter weapons school. You're the pilot who developed the Viper Weave, defensive maneuver that saved dozens of lives in combat. Maya felt exposed and vulnerable. For 12 years she had been just another airline pilot. Now she was being recognized for achievements she had tried to forget. Colonel, I'd appreciate it if you kept this information confidential. I left military aviation for personal reasons, and I've worked hard to build a civilian career. Stevens was quiet for a long moment, processing what he had learned. Captain, can I ask why you left? You were on track for promotion to major, probably squadron commander. Why give up one of the most prestigious careers in military aviation to fly airliners? The question Maya had hoped never to answer hung in the air between them. The real reason she had left the military was something she had never spoken about to anyone. I lost my wingman, she said quietly. Captain Jennifer Walsh. Call sign Falcon. We were flying combat air patrol over northern Iraq when we encountered enemy fighters. I made a tactical decision that resulted in her death. I was cleared of any wrongdoing by the investigation, but I couldn't live with the responsibility of making life and death decisions for other pilots. Stevens nodded with understanding. Fighter pilots all lived with the knowledge that their decisions could mean the difference between life and death, not just for themselves but for their wingmen and the people they were sworn to protect. I'm sorry for your loss, Captain. Falcon's sacrifice wasn't in vain. The mission you two flew that day prevented enemy aircraft from attacking a refugee convoy. You saved hundreds of civilian lives. At the cost of my best friend's life. They sat in silence for several minutes, 2 pilots who understood the weight of command and the burden of survival. Finally, Stevens spoke again. Captain, what you did today saved 283 lives. You took a catastrophic situation and turned it into a successful outcome through superior flying skills and decision-making. That's not something any civilian pilot could have accomplished. Maybe. There's no maybe about it. I've been debriefed by civilian pilots who've experienced single-engine emergencies, and none of them managed their situations with the precision you showed today. Your military training made the difference. Stevens gathered up his tablet and prepared to leave. Captain, I want you to know that what happened up there today reminded me why I became a fighter pilot in the first place. To protect people like those passengers from threats they never see coming. You did that today using skills you earned through years of training and combat experience. After he left, Maya sat alone in the cockpit of the Boeing 777, surrounded by the familiar sounds of ground equipment and airport operations. For the first time in 12 years, someone knew who she really was. The carefully constructed wall between her military past and civilian present had been breached. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Susan, the flight attendant. Captain, just wanted you to know that Jake is stable and expected to make a full recovery. The doctor said you saved his life by getting him to medical attention so quickly. Also, the passengers wanted me to tell you that you're a hero. What you did up there was incredible. Maya smiled sadly. If Susan only knew the full story. If any of them knew that the woman who had brought them safely through one of the most dangerous situations in civilian aviation was once known as one of the most lethal fighter pilots in the world. She gathered her flight bag and prepared to leave the aircraft. The post-flight investigation would take days, possibly weeks. There would be interviews with the FAA, the airline, and probably more military personnel. Her secret was out, at least among a small circle of people who would understand its significance. As she walked through the terminal, Maya reflected on the events of the day. For 12 years she had tried to be someone else. She had hidden her skills, her experience, and her achievements in order to live a normal life. But today had proven that you can't completely escape who you are or what you've trained to be. The other passengers from Flight 447 were gathered at a nearby gate, waiting for a replacement aircraft to continue their journey to Denver. As Maya walked past, several of them recognized her and began applauding. Word had spread among them about their captain's exceptional performance during the emergency. "Thank you, Captain Johnson," called out an elderly man with tears in his eyes. "You saved all our lives today." Maya nodded politely and continued walking, but his words followed her. She had saved lives today just as she had during her military career. The methods were different, but the mission remained the same: protecting people from harm. Her phone rang as she reached the parking garage. The caller ID showed her supervisor's name. "Maya, this is Chief Pilot Richardson. I just got the preliminary report on what happened today. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Chief. Just tired." "Maya, I've been flying for 30 years and I've never seen anything like what you accomplished today. Single pilot operation, engine failure, severe weather, and you brought that airplane in like you'd been practicing the scenario for years. Where did you learn to fly like that?" Another moment of truth. Another decision about how much of herself to reveal. "I had some additional training before joining the airline, Chief." "Well, whatever training that was, it saved a lot of lives today. The company wants to recognize you for your exceptional performance. There's going to be a ceremony, probably some media attention. You're going to be famous." Famous? That was exactly what Maya had been trying to avoid for 12 years. Fame meant scrutiny, and scrutiny meant that her military background would eventually come to light. The career she had built as just another airline pilot was about to end. "Chief, I'd prefer to keep this low-key. I was just doing my job." "Maya, what you did today was way beyond just doing your job. You're going to be recognized whether you like it or not. The aviation community needs to know about pilots like you." After hanging up, Maya sat in her car in the airport parking garage and allowed herself to think about what the future might hold. The secret she had guarded for 12 years was beginning to unravel. More people would learn about her military background, her combat record, and the reputation she had earned as Viper. She thought about Captain Jennifer Walsh, her wingman and best friend who had died in combat over Iraq 12 years ago. Falcon had always believed that their skills and training were gifts that came with the responsibility to protect others. Maybe it was time to stop hiding from that responsibility. Maya started her car and began the drive home, knowing that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't predict. The woman who had spent 12 years trying to be invisible was about to become very visible indeed. 3 days later, Maya was sitting in the chief pilot's office at United Airlines headquarters. Chief Pilot Richardson was there, along with several company executives and a representative from the pilots' union. The atmosphere was formal but supportive. "Captain Johnson," began Richardson, "we've completed our preliminary investigation of the incident. Your performance was exemplary in every respect. However, some questions have arisen about your background and training." Maya had been expecting this conversation. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that come from the military," said one of the executives. "We've been contacted by the Air Force regarding your previous service. They've requested permission to include you in some kind of recognition ceremony." "What kind of ceremony?" "Something about outstanding service to the aviation community. They weren't specific, but they indicated that your military background is quite distinguished." Maya realized that her secret was now completely in the open, at least within certain circles. There was no point in continuing to hide it. "I served 6 years as an F-16 fighter pilot," she said simply. "I left the military to pursue civilian aviation." The room was quiet for several moments as the implications of that statement sank in. Fighter pilots were the elite of the aviation world, and F-16 pilots were among the best of the elite. "Captain," said Richardson finally, "why didn't you mention this when you applied with the company? Military fighter experience is highly valued in commercial aviation. I wanted to build my civilian career on its own merits, not on my military background. I've been flying airliners for 12 years, and I've never needed to use my military training until this week." "But you did use it this week," pointed out the union representative. "And it saved nearly 300 lives." That kind of skill and experience is exactly what the aviation industry needs. The meeting continued for another hour, covering insurance issues, media relations, and the company's response to what was already being called the Denver Miracle. Maya answered questions honestly but without elaborating on the details of her military service that remained classified. As the meeting concluded, Richardson walked her to the door. Maya, I want you to know that the company is proud of what you accomplished. We're also proud to have someone of your caliber flying our aircraft. Your military background doesn't diminish your civilian achievements, it explains them. That evening, Maya was at home when her doorbell rang. Standing on her porch was Lieutenant Colonel Stevens, the F-22 pilot she had met in Denver. He was in civilian clothes and looked somewhat uncomfortable. Colonel Stevens? What are you doing here? I hope you don't mind the intrusion, Captain. I wanted to speak with you privately, away from official channels. Maya invited him in and offered coffee, which he accepted gratefully. They sat in her living room, two warriors who had seen combat trying to find common ground in peacetime. Captain, I've been thinking about our conversation in Denver. About why you left the military and about what happened to your wingman. Colonel, I'd rather not. Please let me finish. I've been flying fighters for 15 years and I've lost friends too. Not in combat, but in training accidents, mechanical failures, things beyond anyone's control. I understand survivor guilt. Maya was quiet, waiting to see where this conversation was leading. I looked up the mission report from the day Captain Walsh was killed. You were flying combat air patrol when you encountered a flight of enemy fighters heading toward a refugee convoy. You made the tactical decision to engage knowing you were outnumbered. Your wingman was shot down, but the mission was successful. The refugee convoy was protected. She died because of my decision. She died because that's what fighter pilots do. We put ourselves at risk to protect others. Captain Walsh knew the risks when she strapped on that F-16 just like you did, just like I do every time I fly. Her death wasn't your fault, it was the cost of doing a job that sometimes requires the ultimate sacrifice. Stevens leaned forward, his voice intense but compassionate. Captain, what you did in Denver proves that you haven't lost the skills that made you a great fighter pilot. You saved those people using the same tactical thinking and crisis management abilities that you used in combat. The only difference is that this time, everyone lived. Maya felt tears beginning to form in her eyes. For 12 years she had carried the guilt of Jennifer Walsh's death, believing that she had failed as a leader and as a friend. Colonel, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I can't go back to that life. I can't be responsible for other people's lives in combat. I'm not asking you to come back to the military, but I am asking you to stop hiding from who you are. The aviation community needs pilots like you, people with your skills and experience. What happened in Denver is proof of that. Stevens stood up to leave. Captain, there's going to be a ceremony next week at the Pentagon. They want to recognize you for your service, both military and civilian. I hope you'll consider attending. After he left, Maya sat alone in her living room, thinking about the path that had brought her to this moment. For 12 years she had successfully hidden her identity as Viper, one of the most accomplished fighter pilots of her generation. Now that identity was being thrust back into the light, whether she wanted it or not. She walked to her bedroom closet and reached into the back, where a box had sat untouched for 12 years. Inside were her military decorations, including the Distinguished Flying Cross she had received for the mission that cost Jennifer Walsh her life. Also in the box was a photograph of her and Jennifer in front of their F-16s, taken just days before that final mission. Maya picked up the photograph and studied her friend's face. Jennifer had always been the optimist, the one who believed that their skills came with a responsibility to serve others. She had died living up to that belief. For the first time in 12 years, Maya began to wonder if Jennifer would have wanted her to spend the rest of her life hiding from the abilities that made her special. Would her wingman have approved of the way she had chosen to honor her memory? The next week, Maya found herself standing in the Pentagon, wearing her dress uniform for the first time in 12 years. The ceremony was small and private, attended only by senior military officers and a few representatives from the airline industry. She was being recognized for exceptional service to the aviation community and outstanding performance in crisis situations that saved civilian lives. As they read the citation, Maya thought about the strange turns her life had taken. She had joined the military to serve her country, become one of the most skilled fighter pilots of her generation, lost her best friend in combat, left the military to escape the responsibility of command, and spent 12 years hiding her abilities. Now she was being honored for using those same abilities to save civilian lives. After the ceremony, she was approached by General Patricia Williams, the highest-ranking woman in the Air Force. Captain Johnson, or should I say Viper? It's an honor to finally meet you. Your reputation in the fighter community is legendary. Thank you, General. Though I should mention that I'm no longer Captain Johnson. I haven't held a military rank in 12 years. Once a fighter pilot, always a fighter pilot. You proved that in Denver. Tell me, what are your plans now? I imagine this experience has changed your perspective on a few things. Maya had been thinking about that question for days. I'm not sure, General. I've spent so long trying to be someone else that I'm not sure who I really am anymore. I think you know exactly who you are. You're the pilot who saved nearly 300 lives using skills that very few people in the world possess. The question is, what are you going to do with those skills going forward? Later that evening, Maya was having dinner with Lieutenant Colonel Stevens and several other military pilots who had participated in the ceremony. The conversation naturally turned to current events in military aviation and the challenges facing both military and civilian pilots. The thing is, said one of the F-22 pilots, we're training a new generation of fighter pilots, but they're learning in peacetime. They don't have the combat experience that pilots like Viper gained in actual warfare. That knowledge and experience is incredibly valuable, but it's not being shared effectively. What do you mean? Asked Maya. I mean that there are maybe 50 pilots in the world with your level of combat experience and tactical knowledge. Most of them are retired or have moved on to other careers. The military is losing that institutional knowledge, and civilian aviation isn't benefiting from it either. Stevens nodded in agreement. There's been talk about creating some kind of exchange program, where experienced combat pilots would work with both military and civilian aviation to share their knowledge. Sort of a consultant role, drawing on real-world experience to improve training and safety. Maya found the idea intriguing. It would allow her to use her experience and skills without taking on the direct responsibility for other pilots' lives that had driven her from the military. Training development, safety protocols, crisis management, Stevens explained. Your combat experience could help both military and civilian aviation. Maya considered the possibility. It would honor Jennifer's memory while helping others without direct command responsibility. I'd need time to think. Maya, what happened in Denver has started conversations at the Pentagon and FAA. Your name is being mentioned in high-level briefings. You're going to be asked to contribute whether you want it or not. 6 months later, Maya stood at the Naval War College addressing military and civilian pilots from around the world. She had accepted a position as senior instructor in crisis management, using her background to train the next generation. Your training never stops being relevant, she told her students. The skills you learn might save lives in ways you can't imagine. A young Air Force lieutenant raised her hand. Captain, what advice would you give pilots transitioning from military to civilian aviation? Maya thought about her 12-year journey hiding from her abilities, and the events that brought her full circle. Don't hide from who you are. Your military training is a gift with responsibility. Whether flying fighters or airliners, your job is protecting people. That responsibility doesn't end when you take off the uniform. After class, Maya walked to her office where Jennifer Walsh's photographs sat on her desk. Next to it was an F-16 model with Viper painted on the side, a gift from the F-22 pilots. She had made peace with both sides of her identity, the warrior she'd been and the protector she'd become. Maya Viper Johnson was no longer hiding from her past. Instead, she was using it to build a better future for aviation. The woman who spent 12 years concealing her fighter ace status had become exactly what Jennifer would have wanted. A teacher, mentor, and guardian of the skies who used her extraordinary skills to protect others and pass on knowledge that could save lives for generations to come.